Grace and peace. Thanks again for tuning in to another episode of I Saw the Lord. Um, this is a really big day. Um, I didn't realize I'd be recording on a Tuesday, which also happens to be my birthday. So I'm really excited, just all around, just celebrating a birthday, getting to record. And not only that, I've got a special guest with us today. Normally, I'm here with Brent. So Brent is taking a nice break from recording, and and for the next couple weeks, I'll try to have some special guests here. So I look forward to bringing you guys just some fresh faces, aside from mine, of course, and voice for those who are just listening on the podcast through audio. But today I've got a very, very special guest with us. This person is extremely talented, super creative. In fact, she has a website, IamLizzieCasey.com. If you ever want to go check that out, feel free. She's got an EP called Miles Away that you can purchase on iTunes and you can download for free. So if you get a chance, go check that out. And I'm honored to be here today with Lizzie Casey. She is my community group leader, and not only that, my neighbor. So this worked out perfectly. How are you doing today, Lizzie?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk with you about your book.
Thanks for coming, because it's always weird, because I'm very introverted as a person. And so just telling people that I wrote a book, most people are like kind of surprised. I'm still surprised that I wrote a book. I always tell people that I'm not a big reader, even though I'm in school.
Right,
I'm reading just because I have to, because I'm in school, but not recreationally. So when I try to encourage people to read, I always feel a sense of guilt because I'm not the biggest reader in the world. But the response of me telling people I wrote a book has been phenomenal and extremely encouraging. And just due to the nature of writing a book, because I'm pretty sure most people are like me, they don't read. So just wanting to stay in front of people's faces and just have content. Just wanting to have content and just wanting to have different mediums for content, having a website, doing blog posts, social media, and just having a blog. I've got these nice microphones. I was like, why don't I put them to use?
Right.
And so I was like, hey, let me do a podcast. Had no clue how to do any of this, but I just jumped, and it's been going strong for these past 6 weeks, and I am honored to have you here today. So thank you for being here.
Yeah. It's funny hearing you say that you're an introvert and people are surprised that you're writing a book or have written a book, because I think a lot of times authors are actually introverts, because you're thinkers, whether you're a thinker on the more feely side or you're a thinker in the more logical processes side. Either way, you have thinkers who are pouring out. You're still expressing yourself, whether it's in conversation like an extrovert normally would, or if it's just typing or in a language form or in a creativity form. So
it's weird, because growing up I definitely wasn't this way. Those who knew me growing up, I would always get in trouble for talking. And so now as an adult, people, most people say, I never hear you talk, and it's did you ask me a question?
Right.
They just want me to start randomly talking. But when it comes to certain topics, you can't shut me up. And one of the topics that I just love talking about is the Lord and just what He's done in my life. And this book is just simply an outworking of that, simply trying to communicate the truths that I've learned to other people. So we've been going strong with this for the past 6 weeks. Last week got a little controversial. We did Why Do People Disagree? It was a topic that we couldn't avoid. And this week is just more kind of philosophical, just having to put on your thinking caps. And you're actually a teacher, so I think this is kind of right up your alley, even though I think you said you're more geared to the English, but I think even just understanding math as a concept,
right.
Just in and of itself, I think speaks volumes. So what were your thoughts when you had an opportunity to check out this chapter?
Well, it was interesting because when you asked me to tackle this topic with you, I was like, oh yeah, well, Math was always interesting.
Yeah,
in
my
high
mom said the
school.
same thing. Like when she read it, she was like, "I don't think many people are gonna like this topic." I was like, "Yeah, whatever."
Yeah, well, my thoughts changed.
Mhm.
So I have found that as I study more, like for my job, because I teach science 3 times a day, and they're deep concepts, and you have fifth graders who are on the same intellectual level as some college students,
Mhm.
and that's not all of them, but you have a few that you have to wrestle with in that, and so a few of my kids asked me crazy questions about, Newton's third law of motion. And today I taught on inertia, and they asked me questions that I just could never have prepared for. And so when they asked me today, for instance, they asked me, where did the word come from? Inertia. And I was like, I don't know. Let's look it up, guys. So we looked it up, and it actually hit on Kepler. Which ties right into our conversation today. So it's really neat. I didn't try to make it work. It just kind of did. And, I'm excited to talk about it because it's what I'm teaching right now. It's my unit right now, motion and design. And we're talking about force and motion and mass and gravity and weight and all of these different concepts intertwined, which are abstract ideas, especially all 3 of Newton's laws of motion. So...
Nah, that's really cool. And you see how God worked that in, just
Yeah, the
how you
timing's
can.
great.
Because I think even, and I don't know if I've told you this, because I went to school and I did want to teach. I always knew teaching was one of my giftings, and I was going to teach math because I was somewhat good at math. I wasn't like that good, but that was probably my strongest subject, if I could say. And then I heard the gospel got saved, and I was like, no, I'm not going to do this. And I think most people, when they look at math, it's like, outside of the classroom, when am I ever going to use this? And it becomes, it's not practical anymore. It's just like, and it's kind of true, if you know how to add and subtract, that's pretty much all you need for life, aside from being in a school environment when you have to, learn algebra and calculus.
Yeah.
But unless you're going into engineering, and any other of those fields that require math, most people really just need to know addition and subtraction. And so
fractions for pizza, because when you get together with your friends and split
Exactly.
pizza, you do need to know that. At least.
That is a very, very good point. And so when I was trying to think how that even come to math, because I was just thinking, like, what are abstract concepts that I can use, and not just, I don't want to just pull out anything from thin air. I wanted it to be grounded in scripture. And so when I was just thinking, I just came up with math, and I was just thinking through that just logically. And so when I opened up the chapter, I make the point that, hey, for most people, math is probably the most dreaded subject. They just can't stand it. Like I said, I think the main reason is the practicality of it. Most jobs, you really don't need to know anything other than addition and subtraction. But when you and I did a lot of research for this one, just getting some background information, that how fundamental math is to our everyday life. And I kind of break it down just micro level, just telling time. You got to make sure you get up on time. You got to know how to just tell time. And it's kind of weird because we've got digital watches, and most people don't even know how to tell, analog or, with their hands and stuff. And I'm like, I even kind of struggle if you got one of those special watches that don't have the numbers on it, and they just have the launch.
Oh, the fashion watches.
Yeah, one of those watches. But just how essential math is just on a micro level. When you're driving, the speedometer, just knowing just small things that we just kind of don't think about. And so I talk about math on that level. And then I talk about math on a macro level, and you brought up Kepler's law of planetary motion. And I didn't even know what the heck that was until I looked it up. And so essentially, and hopefully I'm saying this right, and I guess you'll correct me, the planets revolve around the sun, And so I think Kepler's planetary law of motion or something, I can't remember if I'm saying it correctly, it's like just that mathematical equation that just kind of tracks how the planets orbit around the sun.
Right.
And it's like just the planets obeying mathematical laws, and so just kind of fleshing that out, just like, wow, that's kind of amazing when you think about it. And so from there I go into, and just if anybody knows anything, just kind of the most famous math equation that pretty much anyone, if it's like a Jeopardy question, would know. E equals mc squared, and and I didn't know what it stood for, but Albert Einstein developed this, or excuse me, I don't want to say developed because I kind of touch on that, discovered
it.
This equation, and I believe it was in 1904. And so during that time, people thought that there were two realms. A realm that could be things that could be seen, mass, so something tangible like a book, table, and a realm that could not be seen, energy, wind, heat, things like that you couldn't necessarily see but you knew existed. But he saw how those two things were interchangeable, and just how amazing that discovery was. And the thing that kind of blew me away was that he only discovered it in 1904.
Right, that's not that long ago.
That's really not that long ago, especially for those who advocate that the earth is billions and billions and billions of years ago. And so my question that I posed was like, how was that law, before Einstein discovered it, did that law exist?
Yeah, I love to think about that. And I remember I listened to your audiobook, actually, the chapter on the specific chapter. And one of your questions was the big philosophical question about if a tree falls and no one is around to witness it and observe it, does it make a sound? And my answer, my thought process is obviously yes. We know with sound waves are still going to travel from the tree, whether they're observed or not doesn't make it exist or not exist. I didn't see the sun today, but I know that it exists. Even C.S. Lewis says something about, you may not see the sun, but you see evidence, or you may not see, I forget exactly what he says, but you see evidence of it. So I see shadows and I can make an inference that it exists. And I think that's important, especially to practice that inferencing, because it takes us down, it may take us down rabbit holes, even like the one I'm going on now.
No, that.
But it's still important because we were made to think. We were made to question why. And I think it's a great sharpening skill that we have, even in community. That's why community is important.